Hi, it's Alison from the Law School Toolbox. Today, I'm excited to have Jim Brosnahan, Morrison Foerster trial lawyer and author of Justice at Trial, here with us to talk about life as a trial lawyer and the skills you might need to succeed. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. Well, to start us off, can you give our listeners just a bit of your background so they have some context here?
Very briefly, I was born in Boston, actually, and went to Boston College, went to the Harvard Law School, and then I met my wife there. She was one of 9 women
Oh,
in,
wow.
in the class, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Huh.
But then we got in the car, we went west, and I always wanted to be a trial lawyer. It wasn't something I was debating. It's just what I wanted to do, and I got to do it. And my first trial was a first-degree murder case. We were very understaffed, and the boss handed me the file. I looked at it 6 days, and to be honest, I just loved the experience. And I've tried cases after that for about 60 years. I
Wow.
I did a lot of lecturing. I taught at the National Institute of Trial Advocacy for 50 years. And that, of course, is relevant here because it's devoted to learning by doing. And I hope we talk about that a little bit. And I taught at the Berkeley Law School for 10 years. I taught a class on persuasion, and I discovered an awful lot of law students are worried about their voice. And so we worked on that. So
Hmm.
that's a brief introduction, at least.
Awesome. If people want to learn more about you or reach out to you, how could they do that?
They can come to LinkedIn, where I actually have followers. It's quite exciting. I don't know if we're going
Well,
to lead a revolution or what we're going to do, but I have followers. And I've been teaching on LinkedIn, which is a little unusual. And I've been teaching voice, among other things. And I follow the Supreme Court. I have that on there too. It's very enjoyable for me to be on social media, actually. And I do that every day. And then I have a website which is entitled Jim J. Brosnahan, Brosnahan.com. And that tells my story, and it tells a little bit about the books that I have written over the years and things of that kind.
we will link to all of that in the show notes, and I will definitely be sure to follow you on LinkedIn and keep up to date with what you're up to.
Oh,
You can do the same. You mentioned books. I was thinking of one book, but tell me about your books or book and specifically some of the cases that you discuss in Justice at Trial.
the most recent book is Justice at Trial. It's a memoir, but it's very often about other people. It's about other lawyers that I either admired or maybe didn't admire all that much, and questions about why lawyers do what they do. Why do we go out and represent despised people? Why do we do that? And the foreword of the book is actually written by the dean of Berkeley Law, and the first sentence is, "Every law student should read this book." So you can't do better than that. Erwin Chemerinsky is, I'll just tell you, is a friend of mine, but I did teach there for 10 years, and this is relevant to your subject. I did a lot of one-on-ones with students. I think those are, if you can do it, if the economics of law school will allow it, it's a wonderful thing because they tell you things one-on-one that they don't want to mention in class, including coming back to the question of the voice and working on the voice. And it's never about my voice. It's not imitating me. It's taking their voice, whatever it is, and developing it by practice. It's very important. But I witnessed people would come into that class, they sit in the back, was always a telltale sign. They sit in the back, they look like they might drop the class. Some of them are really nervous about getting up in front of other people. And I researched how many law schools have like a semester class on speech. Very few. And sending people out into the world where they have a concern about speech is not okay.
Right. Certainly not into this profession where we definitely need to be able to speak, whether it's in a meeting or
Yeah.
in a hearing or whatever it is. That is very interesting. I guess you only worked with students for 10 years, but do you feel like this is a more recent phenomenon or something that you also experienced when you were in law school?
Law school was wonderful if you were going to go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it did not prepare me in any way to try that first murder case. I was just like, what now in the courtroom? And I think that helped me a lot because I've been teaching my whole life. When there's learning by doing, then you're actually doing something, and the appreciation of what you're doing is sometimes greater than when you're in a class of 75 people and you're making your notes and you're listening, which is crucial. Let me be clear about that. It's crucial. But honestly, I think in law school, looking back, it's a little bit overdone.
All right.
The
Um,
theory, the theory part of it.
Sure, sure. It's funny because I went to actually another professional school before I went to law school, and it was the same thing. It was architecture school. I did not come out of that experience knowing how to build a building. Let's put it that way. Which maybe is what you think you might learn there, but you know what? It is what it is. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the rewards and challenges of life as a trial lawyer? This must be pretty intense.
It's very intense, and of course, it's changed dramatically. When I started, I was doing trial after trial. I did a couple of trials in 1 week, and that's just the way it was. The way it was structured is not relevant. Well, here's what I know about law students is there's a number of them that want to do trial work. They want to do litigation, and they want to know the answer to your question, which is, what does that take? First of all, you have to like competition. There'll be a lot of that. Litigation, trial work, arbitration. That's all competition. And you have to think that you would like to develop the elements which will really make you a successful person in that you've got to be a very good writer. That's another thing that some law schools do a great job on. They really have a lot of writing classes, which they should. And some law schools, not so much. You have to teach yourself by doing a lot of writing. The speaking, and it's not limited to litigation to be a good speaker. You go into a board of directors and tell them, they should risk everything, and you have to be a good speaker to do that. And the third thing is case analysis. And a case analysis, of course, is borrowing from your law school experience, but it's different. It has grimy facts like, is my client a decent person? Are they going to be a good witness? And there's a lot of human analysis that goes on, which frankly I loved. I loved meeting all those people over the years. You can imagine 60 years.
I
And
would imagine it's quite the cast of characters.
absolutely, and I did a lot of criminal work, and sometimes you're sitting in a holding cell, and you're the only person that's willing to talk to that person. They've cut off all their connections to family and people, and you're the only one to talk to them. So there's a little bit of similarity to some kind of religious exercise where you're talking to these people, and they have mental illness, some of them, and they don't have any money, particularly. It represented some homeless people. There are lawyers that litigate on behalf of homeless people. Maybe they got all their property, such as it is, taken away. That's all.
Mhm.
So my vision of trial work and all that is maybe overly dramatized, but I was there for 60 years and I saw an awful lot of idealistic lawyers, and we don't have time, but I could just name the categories of what they do. And I know you had a program one time about being true to your ideals as you go through law school. I think that's a great subject.
Definitely. And I do think that idea you talked about earlier about needing to like competition Nobody asked me that in law school. Do you like to argue? Do you like competition? And I would have said no, but somehow I ended up as a trial lawyer, as a litigator anyway. You know, like
Yeah,
these are
no,
things.
it's doesn't prepare you for the subtleties of it. But if your mother told you that you argued too much, that's a good sign. And you're always arguing with your Uncle Fuzby at Thanksgiving or something, that's a good sign. If you like to talk, and I've already shown that I do, it's it's a very good sign that you've done some things where you like to argue or in a good way. What you really need to do is learn how to argue at the stage of law school. That's simple.
Right. I feel like I'm actually quite conflict averse, so I'm not quite sure how I ended up as a
Well,
litigator.
there are people that way, and there they are, and they're in a law firm, they wanna make nice with the opponent.
I'm like, "Can't we just all get along here? Do we have to be so aggressive?" It wasn't a great fit.
Yeah.
I do have one question for you because it seems like you've seen this play out in reality. With trials being so limited these days, do you think this is actually a viable career path for newer lawyers?
It can be, and I counsel some number of people who just call me up and I talk to them about it. But the first point is there's a lot more young people out there who want to be trial lawyers who can, in this system, be that. And it's a conflict very often between money, for example, because if you go into a big firm, as I am, there are opportunities to go to trial, but not anything like what I experienced. District attorney's offices, they're in court all the time. It isn't just a question of trial, but it's being in court. Public defenders, yes. There are some pro bono lawyers who try a number of cases. This is too much to cover today, but there's all kinds of things you can teach yourself. You can spend some time in a court watching a trial. You can read about trials. I have a big library about trial lawyers, and you can do a number of things. And mostly you can speak and practice and take your phone, for that matter, or the video, and practice your speech. Maybe we'll get to that, but it's a big subject.
Let's actually switch to that now because I do want to talk with you
Okay.
about this. So, you mentioned you have worked with law students to help them develop their voice, their public speaking, get more comfortable with these things. Tell me about some of the recurring problems you've seen and how people can start to solve them.
The first and biggest problem is the terror that some feel at standing up and speaking. And they can get over that in a class where that's what you do. Most law schools have a class on litigation or something, and you can join it. Most law schools have an opportunity to practice your speech. I talk to the summer associates every year that come to our firm, and I have a long list of things they can do. Of course, I'm adding to their work, which is nice, but I acknowledge that they're reading these books on trade whatever is in Zimbabwe or something. They're doing all that. It's important. And they have to do that, and they would like to have a life even in law school and all that. But I just tell them, practice your speech 2 hours a month. Record it. Listen. Is that good? There was a lawyer this morning in the US Supreme Court arguing for Donald Trump. You could barely tolerate the sound of his voice. I don't know if he had a cold or something, but the scratchy nature of it. And so you practice your speech. You write as much as possible because writing, in the absence of the trial, the writing has become just very often with regard to cases. You have to be a good writer. You have to be a good writer, and briefs do not have to be dull. They really don't. And so there's a lot to that. It's a question of priorities. I mentioned money. You go to a certain firm because first of all, you need to pay off a huge loan. They lend you a lot of money, you got to pay it back. Biden's in the paper on that issue. And I understand that. But in my case, really, any trial was my priority. And you have to set lifetime priorities. Is that what you really want to do? Or even if you make less money, of course, I got to Morrison Foerster, so we did okay.
I think it worked out all right for you in the end.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's drill down. I know you sent me a list of some issues that specific things you see in people that they need to work on developing. I'm just going to run through them. You can talk about anyone you want. We've got things like tempo, volume, tone, emphasis, clarity, and pauses. So tell me a little bit more about these. All seem pretty specific to me. Should I actually be recording myself? I do record myself. I just don't listen to it.
No. So those are my elements that I teach. Tempo, for example, just means speed, but that's a good place to point out this speech that we have is a habit. We've had it a long time. And if we make it sound like we're in a hurry, it's going to be flat. You don't want that. Pauses are interesting because if I let it sink in that Alison was a 14-year-old girl on the Navajo reservation taking care of her brother and her sister when a man was walking on Route 89. He saw their tent, and he went over there, and in his right pocket, he had a .22 pistol. I read a lot, and there's similarities with literature and good literature, but I will read the first 2 pages of a book when I'm deciding whether to read the book, and it better be good. And that's true of juries and judges and arbitrators. And if you can train your voice to keep that attention on you so that when you begin, they want to listen to you. And I repeat it because it's important. It's not copying me or the teacher or anything like that. It's your voice. It's simple. It's not that hard to pause. What you're fighting, though, is the habit of the speech. And your parent, for example, may have been a big influence on how you speak. And there are, of course, people in law school, many of them, that started with an accent of some kind.
Right. No, the pause is interesting. We had an editor once who was taking out all of the pauses and said, "Oh, you're pausing too long. There's too much dead air." And we went back and looked at it and said, "No, actually, those were on purpose." It made sense. It was specifically like Lee explaining a very complicated area of law and then applying it. So when she finished the complicated explanation, there was a bit of a pause so people could digest. And it sounded weird when those were taken out, actually.
Suspense, like, what's going to happen next?
Right. What's coming next? What's coming next? All right. In your career, I know that you have interviewed many potential summer associates, and I know that's an area people are likely to be very interested in. What are you looking for when you're interviewing someone for a role at a place like MoFo? And what are some red flags that people should definitely avoid?
Well, it's a great question. I have interviewed a lot of them. I enjoy it. There are things that would strike me as they're applying, they want to do litigation, and then they explain to me in some detail that they're keeping all their options open. Because can you imagine trying to go on a date and say, "I'm ready. I'm ready to go with you to see how it goes, but I'm keeping all my options open. There's no telling what I might do." No. I'm so glad to interview you because I've researched your firm, and what you have is A and B and C. That's what I'm interested in. I noticed you're almost 50% women, and that's important to me. I care about that. And you do some pro bono, and that's important. And this firm has worked on diversity. That's important to me. And that's why I'm here. Be ready to answer the question, what's your favorite class, and if the answer is Zimbabwe debentures, that might not be the best answer. There's some fudging. I hate to tell you, there's some fudging that goes on in these interviews.
I would
But
hope so. That's the point too, is can you make a case for yourself? I remember interviewing some people, how do you like law school? I don't. Like, not a good answer.
it's not good.
It's not what I'm looking for. Just give me the answer I'm looking for. This is a softball question.
Yeah, really. Here's the heart of it all, and this is true of litigation, and that is it's not about you, it's about the listener. The same thing is true in literature, it's about the reader. You have to think that way. You're not gonna lie about anything, but you have to think, if I was interviewing people, what with this firm, what would they be most interested in? It's a selection of what you do. It's not lying, but it's a selection of it. It's not a therapy session, usually, although it could be, but it's thinking about the person you're talking to. You probably haven't been able to research that individual, but you've researched the firm as much as possible. You've got to go to the trouble of interviewing with that firm, figure out what they're doing and a little bit what that's like. So those are some thoughts, and I have had a summer associate one time, and we tried a very big case, if I may say so. It was like a national case, and we won it. I let him sit in the case and all that, and we were walking down Market Street in San Francisco. We were going to have lunch with him and a couple of others, and he said to me, I who had won the case, he said, "I wouldn't have tried it that way."
You're like, great, thanks for
He
sharing.
was, he was never with us. He did we sent him back to law school to irritate other people. But you can be outspoken about a lot of things. There's nothing wrong with that. Interesting law experiences is something that you've had. I take summer associates out to lunch in groups of about 5, one-on-one, and we talk about anything they want to talk about. And that's where they're pretty candid about what they want to do and all of that. The one-on-one, I want to reinforce what I mentioned very briefly. If you're in law school, if I was doing it today, I would start after the mandatory classes and all that. Maybe the first year is different. But I would figure out which teachers do one-on-one with people and which teachers allow me to speak and develop my speaking abilities, which teachers do a lot of writing. I noticed the other day that Duke Law School had a huge list of writing classes. Of course, that would be essential. I never felt that my writing was now perfected and I didn't need to learn anything else. I spent a lot of time reading books on writing and speaking and the things that I knew. This is over all the years. I'm reading a book right now on creativity, which is interesting in the law. Creativity is important. You don't make things up, but the case has all these facts. The Romans used to call it invention, and they didn't mean make it up. They meant you take the important facts here, they're true, hopefully, and then you tell that story. And those are some things you can think about.
Definitely. I think the story is the key to a lot of these things. I clerked for a federal district court judge, and it was so clear that the lawyers who understood that did better than the ones who did not. And they're just boring everyone, and we don't care what they're talking about. The people who came in and said, this case is about X, Y, and Z, and it's very compelling, the story they're telling. And we're all, oh, yes, I'm much more interested in this.
Keeping people's attention is not easy. And you need to do it because if they didn't hear that or they didn't appreciate it, you weren't clear enough, then it's like it never happened. Yeah.
Right.
You learn that.
Yes, it is. I did one trial in my
Yeah.
career, and we had a jury consultant come in and did some sample juries. We did the test juries and whatnot, and I was the one who watched all the videos, and it was absolutely fascinating to watch these deliberations of the people who sat through exactly the same presentation, 3 different groups, and 2 come up one way, 1 comes up the other, and you're just watching this and seeing what they picked up and what they remembered, and it was fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the fun parts of trial work. I rode some buses, I think in 5 jurisdictions, Hawaii, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and where I was gonna try cases there, and I would just ride the bus and listen to people talk,
Huh.
and look at them and ask myself, "Are they really gonna care about my defense of interstate commerce?" I know they have lives to live. I'm looking at people in this bus and I'm listening to them. What would appeal to them? I think that's one of the great parts of litigation, actually, is all the people that you meet, you interview the witnesses, you learn how to handle witnesses properly. You're not abrupt with them. An inquisitive personality is a great help.
I think that's so true based on my very limited experience.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you would like to share before we wrap up here?
No, I think it's a good life. If you can find a place where you'll be trying cases, it's a very good life. You're on the edge of law. I'm writing a book right now, actually, on the history of trials, starting with Socrates and coming all the way through some very important trials that Galileo, for example, the science, those kind of things. It's great fun, but it's been a good life. And my wife, as I say, was a judge for 40 years. And one person asked us one time, this is hilarious, do you talk about things other than law? Yeah, I think we have talked a little bit about the children. Oh,
Occasionally.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and whether they should go to law school.
Yeah. Well, one did. One's
Oh,
have if you can imagine, there's 2 judges in our family of 5, and so I try to speak at home when I can.
thank you so much for joining us. Remind us again how people can find out more about you.
I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm active on LinkedIn, and I answer any messages that I get from people. I answer them, and that takes me a while, but it's a good thing. And then I have a website, and it talks about the book, which is Justice at Trial, and the website is JimBrosnahan.com, and I greatly appreciate this chance to talk to some law students. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for watching. And please subscribe so you don't miss anything. And you can check out lawschooltoolbox.com and reach out with any questions.